secret that I love trains. I always talk about trains. It was a boyhood love of mine back in the days when trains were hauled by steam and that. Not anymore, but I tell you what, some of the best railways in the world you will find in Asia. And David Bowden is an author. He's based in Asia, he's based in Malaysia, and he has just written a great book called Great Railway Journeys of Asia. So when I saw that, I said, well, I've got to talk to David about this. David Bowden, hello, and good to speak to you again.
Good morning, Steve. How are you? Yes, wonderful. And like you, I started my early life. I went to school on a steam train. So, yes, I great love of trains.
I was born and raised in Sydney, and I was in the school train club, and just about every Saturday afternoon we'd catch the 12:16 train from Granville to Richmond because it was hauled by a steam locomotive.
Wow, that's fantastic. I was raised in Newcastle, and every so often we would get a steam train to school, but most of the time it was diesel. But yeah, occasionally the steam train would get everyone a bit excited.
Yep, I think the steam trains have got a lot of personality, but probably most of the trains that you write about aren't hauled by steam anymore, except there is one, which is the Darjeeling Limited, which is they call the toy train, and that's a narrow gauge track. I think it's about a 2 foot in the old language gauge, which goes through the hills of Darjeeling. That's a fascinating little journey, that one, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Steve, and that's in the book because it's so famous. But I think they also call it a toy train because if you look at it, and there's some nice photographs in the book. That people on the train, they almost dwarf the train to some extent. But yeah, it goes through the tea country, India, and it's one of the great railway journeys of the world, and obviously it had to be included in the book.
Well, some of the journeys that you have written about, now there are some pretty famous ones like the Eastern and Oriental, which is, well, I mean, you need a little bit of money to go on that. It is a luxury train, and that goes basically from Singapore to Thailand. Not quite the centre of Singapore, but it does go from just near the border of Singapore right through to Thailand. And of course, you go through some of the great cities, Kuala Lumpur, etc., and you end up in Bangkok.
Steve, I've been very fortunate to have been on that train a couple of times. And yes, and it covers some fantastic scenery. Yes, it does terminate in woodlands just near the causeway to Malaysia. But yeah, and people travel in wonderful luxury with the showers in their cabin. And the other interesting thing, it does a stop at Kanchanaburi, which is where another train starts, the Death Railway, which of course is very well known with Australians.
Well, if anyone's seen the movie or heard about the movie Bridge Over the River Kwai, that of course is about the building of that rail. Well, that's about the building of the bridge that carried it over. That was a very, very perilous journey anyway, wasn't it? It was literally carved out in the side of a fairly steep hill.
It's a very interesting, the construction of that and the construction of many other train lines, of course, are very interesting. And the sad thing about that train line to Kanchanaburi and beyond is that it's also known as the Death Railway, and many Allied forces, including Australians, died on that, but also many, I think about 10 times the number of Asians died on that, building it. They say there's a sleeper for every person who died on that train line.
They were very, very harsh conditions. Well, the prisoners were treated like slaves, but so were the locals. They weren't fed properly. They worked long hours. I've been there, and it's quite sad, really, isn't it? Because you can't forget the history of that line at all, I don't think.
No, it's a rather gruesome topic to talk about, but not all train lines are wonderful with steam trains and luxurious cabins and champagne and fine dining. Some of them have been built under very arduous conditions, and sadly the train line from Kanchanaburi and beyond involves the death of many Allied forces and Asian forced labourers during the Second World War.
If People want to go to Kanchanaburi. There is, and I've been to it, I think it's around about November each year, they have a Sonne Lumiere where they recreate the bombing of the bridge over the River Kwai, and it's just fantastic. There's sound and lights and explosions. They actually use a real steam locomotive during that Sonne Lumiere, and everyone gets a set of headphones because you can listen to it in your own preferred language. And it really is a great experience for people who are into military history or who want to find out about the building of that tragic railway.
I think you're right. Of course, a lot of people have an interest in this. I mean, their grandfather, father, or even a great-grandfather was involved in that. People are, I think, are rediscovering trains, that they want to make these journeys. In the past few decades, everyone's wanted to get from A to B as quickly as possible. But of course, now often it's the journey rather than the destination, which is important. You can catch a train from Bangkok up to the train ends at Nam Tok, going by the bridge you just talked about. But and you can stay there. You can get off the train. You can stay in some very nice river resorts, and you can learn about the history of that train, and then go back to Bangkok the next day, or continue down south to Hua Hin and even down to the Malaysian border. But there are trains all through Asia. Some of them are not necessarily arduous journeys, but they're not the most comfortable. But it's the thrill of being on these trains where often few people travel.
Well, one of the ones I want to talk about is because one of my favourite countries is Vietnam, and they have the Reunification Express there, which basically runs, depending on which way you're going, but we'll start from the south. It runs from Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon as the locals call it, up to Hanoi. And that is an absolutely a fantastic trip because you basically traverse most of the length of Vietnam. But what you do is you go between the various cities, and it goes to great places like Nha Trang, and it goes to Da Nang and Hue, etc. And you can hop on and hop off, have a couple of nights or whatever in each place. But it is a really comfortable train. You can sleep on the train as well. I've done that. I actually took the train, and they still call it the Reunification Express, apparently, from Hanoi to Sapa in the highlands near the Chinese border. So I've experienced it, and it was a really great adventure to do that because the train is comfortable, but the countryside that you traverse is absolutely stunning.
You're exactly right. And that is, there is no such thing as a Reunification Express. But yes, people know it. The train that goes from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi is known as that. And it's interesting, after the Vietnam or the American War, American War in Vietnam, that was one of the first things that the new government put in place because they realised the importance of train travel in reunifying the country, the North and what was North and South Vietnam. But yeah, I've been on that train several times. I've slept on it. I love sleeping on the train. I've been up on the other train from Hanoi to Sapa to get up into the highlands and the Hill tribe communities. I mean, that's also wonderful overnight train journey. And a lot of people underestimate Vietnam. That journey is 1,726 kilometres long. You know,
that's huge.
Trains in Vietnam move at, less than 100 kilometres an hour. So to call it the Reunification Express is a bit of a misnomer. It's a wonderful experience, and you can dine on the train, you meet Vietnamese people, you can sleep on the train, you see wonderful scenery. It's definitely one of my favourite journeys. Train or railway journeys in Asia.
And traversing through Hanoi is quite an experience too, because some of the houses almost touch the train, don't they, when you go through the suburbs there?
Yeah, there's also a train from Bangkok down south which does it. Goes through markets where they actually have to lift these awnings up of the temporary market so that the train can go through. And when the train goes through, the umbrellas come back down and business continues. So I mean, this is the excitement of train travel. And you're not going to get that anywhere in any other form. Even in a car, you're not going to get that. In a plane, you're definitely not going to get it. So I think you and I share a common love of trains, which is, to me, one of the best ways to discover Asia.
That was part 1 of my conversation with David Bowden, author of Great Railway Journeys of Asia. Part 2 of this conversation will be seen on another video.